A student's life outside of the classroom is often portrayed as an exciting whirlwind of partying, studying, and adventure. We don't blink twice when we hear that someone hasn't eaten since 2 days ago, or that they have slept no more than a few hours over the same period. It is sadly accepted that college students are supposed to starve and sustain themselves with 99-cent packets of ramen. Students are not portrayed feeling hungry, needing help to find their next meal or a comfortable place to sleep for the night. This is a harsh reality for many students and is too common a situation for colleges and universities across the country. There are thousands of untold stories. Today, we will hear a firsthand account about one student's food and housing insecurity and talk about what help is out there for students. Let's get started. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Your authentic self.
That's so critical. Thanks for joining us on this edition of Bouncing Back. Let's welcome our guests. Sarah Levine is a senior honors student at Temple University studying neuroscience and political economy. A New Jersey native, this first-generation college student came to Temple for the diversity, accessibility, and chance to study neuroscience in interdisciplinary manner that she wanted to. Finding comfort in Sarah's time at Temple has not been a given. Moving in freshman year, it was still uncertain if she would be able to afford the semester. Once settled in, she knew right away not to take a roof over her head and a given meal every day for granted. She knew she would have secure housing for a year and an allotted amount of food, and could sense a relief she was not used to. But regardless of having a first-hand experience with food and housing insecurity, Sarah prides herself on her interdisciplinary studies and experiences. Our second guest, Dr. Sarah Goldrick-Rabb, is a professor of higher education, policy, and sociology here at Temple University, and the founder of the Wisconsin Hope Lab, the nation's only translational research laboratory, seeking ways to make college more affordable. She's best known for her innovative research on food and housing insecurity in higher education, having led the two largest national studies on this subject, and for her work on making public higher education free. She is the recipient of the William T. Grant Foundation's Faculty Scholars Award and the American Educational Research Association's Early Career Award. And in 2016, Politico magazine named her one of the top 50 people shaping American politics. Her latest book, Paying the Price, College Costs, Financial Aid, and the Betrayal of the American Dream, is an Amazon bestseller and has been featured on The Daily Show with Trevor Noah and in the New York Review of Books and her C-SPAN's Book TV, among other venues. The Chronicle of Higher Education calls her a defender of impoverished students and the scholar of the struggles. And she's ranked 10th in the nation among the education scholars, according to Education Week. Well, thank you both for joining us. You both are quite impressive, and I'm very excited to actually have this opportunity to talk about this. And I actually first learned about this whole topic was through you I guess you were featured in the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I saw it on Facebook and the power of social media. And here you are today, so I'm excited that you're here. So why don't we start with Sarah, and you tell us a little bit about some of your personal struggles, and we'll just have a great conversation about what it means to be, food insecurity. What does that mean, and what does that look like?
So a lot of the experiences with food insecurity that I have faced have been deciding to pay for bills, having outstanding tuition, working 2+ jobs at a time while balancing a full-time workload, which I know is also something that I feel like we've been sensitized to hear, but when you're actually going through it, and you don't realize the impact that also food insecurity has on you once you're actually trying to allocate funds to all these other different places, and you realize the most basic human necessities are what are going overlooked. Like starving in class, like if you're hungry, it's hard to focus. Not taking that roof over your head for granted because you have rent to pay. So.
Yeah, in college, it's funny, I was thinking back to my college days because I came to Temple and I remember not taking my books for granted. not taking my gas to get me to school for granted, but I lived at home, so it was a different situation. So I never really had to worry about my next meal. So I can't even imagine what that has to feel like and be like. And it's funny that you said you don't want to overshare or overtell your story. I feel like it's a story that we're not really talking about enough.
No, we're not. I mean, especially compared to the number of people who are going through these challenges. You know, I met Sarah not long after arriving at Temple, and I have to be honest, when she started to tell me the story, I go through this range of emotions as a faculty member. I'm horrified every time that I meet another student who's going through it. But as a researcher who's been watching this happen for more than a decade in my own studies, I'm a bit numb. I just keep thinking, yep, here's another one. And one of the big challenges is, though, that most people around me have no idea that there are so many because the stories aren't out there.
Right. Yeah. It's funny that you say that you're saying, yep, here's another one. And I think we all go on these missions to help our students, or, you know, our passion, because it sounds like it's something you're really passionate about. And I know that you and I have had a lot of conversations, and you're very passionate, and I can see her one day being the motivational speaker to college students and others. But so how do we, other than this show, like what can we do to bring this matter to, you know, everyone's attention and really make it?
Yeah. It's pretty straightforward, to be honest with you. We're sitting in an institution of education, right? This is a school, and schools and educators have a huge role to play. So the reason that we should be horrified and appalled that Sarah and other students go through these challenges is because they're doing the right thing and going to college to get an education, and we all benefit if they get a degree. And it's pretty obvious to anybody that if you haven't eaten or you haven't slept the night before, you're going to have a hard time mastering college level material. We even know that it's hard to master elementary school material if you haven't eaten or, you know, had something to eat before you took a test, for example. So educational institutions have a role to play in educating people, including about this issue. And so the big role that we need to play is in sharing with others what the research and data says on this, what the human experience looks like on this, and then do the very common sense things that we all know how to do to feed and house people. The same thing that parents with lots of resources are able to do for their children, we need to do on behalf of the people who don't have the wealth of resources that so few families today actually possess.
Well, that's actually really true, because I was doing a lot of research before this show about the amount of families that are actually, we say food insecurity, housing insecurity. And to be honest with you, when I first thought about doing this show, I thought, food insecurity, housing insecurity, how is that possible? You know, and you and I we've become friends through this whole experience, because I'm like, wait a second, how can I meet her? You were sharing a story. She was sharing a story with me once that she was meeting somebody and she was talking about food insecurity, and they were sitting there having this cup of coffee or a muffin or whatever, and never thought once to say to her, can I get you something to eat, right? So, and then you made an interesting point. You said, well, you know, elementary school students can't function, but the schools do provide, there are schools that do provide
free reduced lunch, which
right.
like growing up, like I qualified for, and I was used to that, and I would stay at school from beginning in the morning to late at night, like take the very last bus possible, because at school I was able to get food. So I would try and even like stock up, bring anything else that I could, and bring it home to like my little brother or whoever, like who wasn't in the same school district at me at the time, or even like beforehand. And I do the same things now, like you bring the containers. If you have a friend that has a meal plan, being that like I'm an upperclassman, you have them swipe it in and you stock up like on all the cereal. You bag up the cereal, take little fruit, you low-key kind of like take loaves of bread here and there. I probably shouldn't be admitting this on TV to Temple, sorry guys. Someone's paying for it. And exactly, like if you qualify for free and reduced lunch, all of a sudden you're trying to better yourself and you go to higher education, but that safety net isn't there for you. Nothing has changed. If financial aid and everything involved of paying for college is actually based on your financial background at home, why all of a sudden do they think that when you're at college it's just like, oh no, like everything that happened previously growing up, like that doesn't affect you now. Like if you qualified for this resource before, you shouldn't need it now. When clearly, like also Sarah was saying, that all of your family support, a lot of other students have, well, not a lot, as you also said with research, there are select students that have this financial support coming from home. So like you can't ignore who you are before coming to college, and that impacts you, and those resources have to be there to create that equity, not just equality in higher education. It's about filling that gap, just coming to school and getting here. Like I said, like you also said in the intro, that freshman year, me not really knowing if I'd even be there until like upon move-in, just getting here isn't the challenge. It's not, and even getting here in itself, if you're trying to fill out those applications, find those fee waivers and everything, there are so many barriers that you also are led to believe once you get here, everything's just going to be masked and you'll have all the resources possible, but all of a sudden you realize everything's not there. Yeah, sorry.
No, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to continue our conversation about bouncing back from housing and food insecurity when we come right back. Welcome back. We're talking about bouncing back from food and housing insecurity. So when we left off, we were sharing a story about financial aid, and that's the question. I've been so, enthusiastic about doing this show, and I've been sharing it with a lot of people, and this is the show I'm working on, and the first thing that comes out of their mouth is, well, doesn't she work? Doesn't she have financial aid? So explain, where's the shortage happening, and why, and better yet, why is it happening?
Right. Well, a lot of things have changed over time about going to college, and the situation with financial aid and work is one of the biggest ones. So it used to be the case that if you qualified for financial aid, it would mainly cover your costs. And it was intended to, especially if you came from a low-income family. But these days, federal funding and state funding have really languished, and state resources have left the institutions, especially the public ones, way short. So as a result, a student who does qualify for the maximum amount will still be left usually footing at least 40% of the total bill. That 40% is a very large number. So even at this institution, you might see a student from a low-income family be given financial aid and yet still asked to pay about $15,000 a year. The institution will have trouble making up for that because we don't have a huge endowment, and very few places do. Unless you're at Harvard or Yale or something like that, you're not going to get a giant grant to make up for it. So you turn to work. And the problem is work doesn't work like it used to. There are a lot of people competing for low-wage jobs, including people who aren't in college and therefore have more time on their hands, don't have class schedules to compete with. So our students go out there and try to find 20 or 30 or even 40 hours of work that pays a reasonable amount to make that kind of money, and they can't. And so the question is, once they fall short, who's going to help them? And usually the answer is they turn to their family, and their families are already short as well. They probably have spent almost everything they have trying to help that student go to college, and so now the student is left with nothing.
Look at my mouth is like 40%. It's 40% left.
Yep.
Oh my.
And it's incredibly common, and it's worse even at places like community colleges, the places that you think are so inexpensive. I mean, the federal Pell Grant alone was supposed to cover 100% of the cost of attending a public four-year school. That was when it was created in the 1960s. Today, it covers 1/3. So if you add on the little bit that people get from the state and the little bit that they get from their institutions, if they're lucky, they're only left with 40%. Frankly, it's often even more than that.
What is interesting is that they say, and I don't know if this is accurate, that 30% of the population is actually college educated. That's I think that's a really small population. So now what I'm hearing is we're even making it harder for people to go to college and get educated.
Yeah, more people are going today than ever before, but we also are seeing a very large number of them leaving without a degree and unfortunately in debt, precisely for the sorts of reasons that we're describing here. I mean, we talk a lot about how these high school students today are not getting the education that they need, and they come to college and they need remediation. And we know that if you're placed in remediation for something like math, your chances of finishing college are really low. Well, my estimates indicate that about half of all college students are dealing with something like food or housing insecurity, and the negative effects are just as big a deal as being academically underprepared, but we don't talk about it.
Half? That's a huge amount of students. Half are dealing with food and housing, and we're really just concentrating right today on food, but you've experienced both, correct?
Yes.
Food and housing. So share with us a little bit about, if you want, I know it's hard, share whatever you feel comfortable sharing, because we want somebody who's watching this show to know that they're not alone.
So facing like food and housing insecurity, I already kind of went on a little tangent about like when I go to the I don't even know how to call them anymore because I haven't been there in so long. The cafeterias or like at JH and everything. There was one time though, a while ago, that has made shopping for food even more difficult when you do have the funds. I was caught trying to steal an avocado at a local grocery store, and at the time that was back in my sophomore year, and they asked what grade I was in when I was graduating, and I said like I was only a sophomore, and they banned me from the store for exactly 2 years, to the point where I haven't been able to even find food on my own, which has been all the more so difficult because I've been in even more so of a food desert, even though North Philadelphia is that anyway. Other times I have gone through a lot of traumatic experiences with my housing where it's put me on the streets, and I've been just couch surfing day to day, just like taking my bare necessities with me and just seeing like where I'll land, or just staying at the tech center for as long as I can, and then just like trying to like bring a toothbrush with me, just like freshen up in the bathroom and just like throw on some deodorant and you're good to go. You just say, oh, like I'm just like pulling an all-nighter, ha 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 ha, but really like you're not, you don't have a choice. Of which all of this, like I would not even be here today if I wouldn't have such really strong people in my life, such as like either my family, like Sarah Golder Grab, and like even just like roommates that even though they don't go through the same exact experiences I go through, they've been able to support me in understanding to this. Which is, I think, a very important thing, is starting that communication between the students to understand that this isn't something that people choose, that it's actually a lot more difficult, that even if like you are living with someone or you've been experiencing face to face and you're just like, if I can do it, why can't you? That's not the right mindset.
This is so often the reaction that students get, that the idea is that they've done something wrong, you know, or their families have done something wrong.
Yeah, their families have done something wrong.
You know, it's impossible. I mean, they're put in a situation where, you know, goodness, I mean, they fall short. They've done everything they're supposed to. They're expending a lot of effort. You know, one thing that's important to note is Sarah's not an exception in that she's extremely hardworking. She's bright. She knows what she wants to do. We have done studies comparing the people who are food insecure or housing insecure with the students who aren't, and you'd be amazed. We even see homeless students spending as much time in their class or as much time studying as other students. If that doesn't speak to how driven and committed they are to their education, I mean, what does? I mean, it would be easier, faced in these circumstances, frankly, to drop out of college. It wouldn't be wiser, but at the same time, it might simplify your life. And so we see people pursuing an education despite obstacles that most people really, frankly, can't even imagine, but that could legitimately happen to one of their kids.
Well, it's funny you say that, because you were sitting there and saying, if it wasn't for all the strong people I have in my life, and if it wasn't for this, but how about giving yourself a little pat on the back too, because you know, you're a senior now, you have one more semester to go, and I think that we know she's going to make it, right? We're definitely going to make it. She's going to make it.
I don't have a choice. I am walking in May.
But you are walking in May because of your inner strength as well. I mean, it takes a lot of inner strength to go through the story, the avocado story. To me, I'm blown away.
Isn't it just amazing? I mean, is there anything more middle class seeming than an avocado as a strategy for dealing with food insecurity? And it's so smart, right? I mean, it's not potato chips that if she ate it, she'd be hungry really shortly after. If she eats an avocado, she's actually likely to do reasonably well in her next class. And frankly, you know, some people might say, well, why is she shoplifting? I mean, when people are pushed to that edge where they really have no other option, I think that we are remiss to stand in judgment. You know, I think that we all will do things. I mean, if you sleep on the street, right, and you have to keep yourself safe and you have to be able to sleep, you too might do something that you wish that you otherwise wouldn't. But what we should really be asking is, what kind of society takes a young person who's going to college and leaves them so short of the support that they need, that they would do something like need to steal an avocado?
Well, I'll take it even one step further. I always say, what kind of society would leave anybody, any human being, sleeping on the cement at night or hungry? Because that to me is, it's just not right. But what can we do? What can students do if they're they're at the bot. Like they feel like they can't take it anymore, and they don't want to go steal the avocado.
Yep.
And what is there something that they can do? Is there a place they can go? I mean, I know there's food banks in the city. Can they go to the food banks in the city?
Yeah, I mean, they can, and there are food pantries, for example, in local communities. Ideally, those things are located on campus so that students can fit that into their already insane schedules. But the biggest thing they need to do is they do have to kind of take it on themselves and tell somebody. And it is exceptionally hard to do. I know that. And that's why we're trying to make sure, for example, that the faculty have a note on their syllabus that says, if you're enduring these things, we want to know about it. I mean, if it's our job as educators to reach you with the material, then it's our job as educators to at least let you know that we care enough to ask these questions. At the same time, the students also need to step up and look at the resources around them and look at what's missing on behalf of their other students and ask their institutions to provide maybe some additional supports. They need to make some demands, otherwise those needs are not known and they're not heard. In addition, there's just, like I said before, there's some education and there's some awareness raising. So students every day around here see homeless folks. They need to check their own assumptions. The next time that you pass a homeless person, don't assume that person isn't enrolled in college or hasn't been enrolled in college or wouldn't be a darn good college student too. And educate yourself so that when it's you and you experience it the first time, that you don't have to go through that sort of stigma and shame.
Well, I think what you said was great. We have to wrap it up, but one thing I don't want to be remiss. I want to make sure that when we leave the show, anybody who's watching the show, I think something you said was very important, is to ask for help. And there's no shame in asking somebody for help if you need help. If you need something to eat, there's no shame in saying to your friend, I am really hungry. So with that, I will just say thank you very much to our guests, Sarah Levine and Dr. Sarah Goldreich-Raab, for joining us today on Bouncing Back. Today we heard from a student who reached her lowest point when she was couch surfing and eating a little bit of cereal in the morning here and there in the hopes of spreading food out over multiple days. A student should not have to live like a scavenger, hoping to find luck out and find events on campus offering free food, nor should a student fall asleep in class because they were up working with no place else to sleep. Most importantly, a student should not fear judgment or scrutiny when they go to seek the much needed help. And there is help, and today we discussed where you can go if you are facing hunger and housing insecurity. I hope that by hearing Sarah's story, you are reminded that this is not a hypothetical situation, but an all too real struggle for many students, and know that you can overcome this and bounce back into a positive living situation. Once again, I'm Lisa Bien, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Bouncing Back. Hello, I'm Lisa Bien, and welcome to Bouncing Back.
God makes a way.
Be honest and communicate.
Your authentic self.
That's so critical.